All right, I would like to call the meeting to order. GPAC meeting number, 24, I believe? So can I have a roll call, please?
Yes. And if each person as I call, if you can unmute and just confirm your attendance. Member Bajaj?
Present.
Member Karzan?
Present.
Member Eller? Member Eller? Okay. Member Funabashi?
Here.
Member Gaddis?
Here.
Member Hannon? Member Kilroy?
Here.
Member Lamb?
Here.
Member Light?
Present.
Member McKenzie?
Here.
Member Moses? Member Nafisi?
Present.
Member Pinsley?
Here.
Member Samaras? Member Samaras?
Present.
There, okay. I saw his screen. Member,
Sorry about that.
that's right. Member Sanchez?
Here.
Member Simpson?
I am here.
Member Solomon?
Here.
Member Stoddard? I believe he actually requested an excused absence for this evening. Member Szymanski?
Here.
Member Turner? Member Waller?
Here.
And then just one more time, Member Eller?
Here.
Okay. Member Hammond? Okay, and then Chair Bureau.
Here. Vice Chair Sanchez, would you lead us in the salute to the flag, please?
Sure. Hand over heart, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Order of the agenda. Anybody want to change anything? Can I hear a motion to approve?
I would make a motion that we approve the order of the agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Lena, do you want to do a count of hands or just?
Yeah, if everyone can use their raised hand function on Zoom, do a show of hands. Count of hands. 16, 17, yeah, 17, 18. Okay, yeah. Okay, motion passes 18.
Thank you very much. We'll lower our hands. Next item, we have our consent calendar.
Or I'm sorry, Chair, right before that, to receive and file blue folder items. I think you did have one that we sent out
Okay.
an hour ago.
Motion to receive and file.
Second. All those in favor, could you please raise your hands again?
Seventeen, 18. Okay, all right. Motion passes. Okay, now you can move to the consent calendar.
Okay. We have the posting for a meeting as well as our meeting minutes. Any comments?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Member Kilroy. We got a motion.
Second.
Got a second from Member Gaddis.
Are there comments before we take a vote? I know I saw some hands up, but were they for comments or
No.
minutes or?
No, I think that was voting.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
trying to keep the Wendy schedule, so we're moving here quickly.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So let's go ahead and vote on the consent calendar.
We got hands up.
Okay, 16, 17, 18. Okay. All right. Motion passes.
More hands. All right. No items excluded from our consent calendars. We have no public hearings tonight. And now we have items continued from our previous agenda. We have a discussion for possible action on the draft open space and conservation element update for the City of Redondo Beach general plan. We're going to finalize the recommended edits to the draft and conservation.
Are we going to start with public comment though? For non-agenda public comment?
So we actually don't have anyone. We have one attendee that's just here to listen, but we don't have any public comment on non-agenda. And there's no e-comments on non-agenda as well.
Okay.
I believe you guys did just have a receive and file that was already part of the agenda packet.
Just want to make sure that.
And the one blue folder item that you received and filed under section E.
Okay, I just want to make sure we didn't skip over.
Okay, but I think we do need to do a little something here because we don't have an option for public comment on our entire agenda. So did we miss that on the typing of this?
Well, no, then what it is when you're actually on your item, you can take public comment during the item just as in any other meeting as well.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the
Oh,
clarity.
that's not the case. You must have a non-agenda item.
All right, so let's
By
go.
law.
Am I looking at different minutes? I see item H, public participation on non-agenda items.
No, you're looking at,
Yeah, right. So, and my understanding was there was no one who wanted to speak on
Yes.
non-agenda items, correct?
right, okay, perfect.
You have to announce it and ask.
All right, so let's go back. Public participation on non-agenda items. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to address the General Plan Advisory Committee?
There's no one from the public with raised hand right at the moment to address on non-agenda items. And then there are no comments on non-agenda items. There was a couple written comments that were part of the agenda packet. And then there's the one blue folder comment letter that was received and filed already under item E.
Thank you, Lena. Okay, so we can move on to item H1. We're going to receive and file, items continued from our previous agendas. So, Wendy, is this you? Sean?
I think it's going to be Sean. I didn't put that item on the agenda, so I didn't know.
No, it's actually just items for discussion and presentation or action. Item J. That's the only item.
That's
So is it
already
now?
considered.
I heard open space, so I didn't know if we were doing open space. That's why if we're on to land use, then yeah, that's
Yeah.
me. All right, hit it. It's your show. Okay. I don't have it in front of me. I have like 8 other things in front of me, but of course I don't have the actual agenda. So thank you everybody for being here. Let me put the show up, the actual show. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. Great. So we've gotten through the agenda. Maybe Chair, this probably would have helped. I could have shared that. So tonight, our plan of action is to go through the draft land use element outline, do a brief presentation for you guys, and then to open it up after we're done giving our overview for a large group discussion and your ideas and feedback to us before we start to draft the actual element goals and policies itself. Once we're done reviewing the, I might have skipped, we have announcements too. Staff will give you announcements in a minute after this. But we'll also go over the next steps, talking about what the remaining meeting topics will be and how we will continue forward. Believe it or not, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Holy cow. I don't think anybody believed that, but I see Bob shaking his head. Bob, don't go there. We're sticking to the hour and we have a light at the end of the tunnel. So I know there's a long journey to actual adoption, but you know, for the investment you guys have made thus far, we're getting close. And then we'll turn it back over to public comment and then any other GPAC referrals to staff. And then we'll close it till the next meeting.
Wendy, can I interrupt you? Member Lamb has a question.
Yes.
A quick question on format here. When do you want the questions? Are we directly to you or to staff?
At the end when we'll go through the presentation and then we'll open that up for questions then.
Great, thank you.
It's not a long presentation, so thank God it's not like the land use alternatives that you guys have to sit through. You'll be able to get to us, talk to us. This is intended to be more of a listening session for us. We'll provide some context about our thought process and some of the things that we've been looking at, and then really just do some listening from you guys about the things that are important to you and what you want to see. So when we're drafting that, we can make sure we're hitting on those points and we're not just showing up with a crafted element already without some initial feedback from you guys. So I think right now, Sean, can I hand this over to you to do some brief updates on where we are with housing element, open space, and safety?
Yeah, sure. And chime in, Brandy. We are hopefully at the end of the housing element. That we have done some back and forth with HCD lately. We have just submitted earlier this week what we hope to be the final housing element to HCD for their final approval and certification. So we are working.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Sean. So. Yeah. With the housing element, we got our comment letter back from, we adopted the element back in October. We received our comments at the beginning of January from HCD and had to make some major revisions. And so City Council had 2 public hearings in February because it was revising more on the land use side of things. We got that to HCD. They had 60 days to get comments back to us, which will be on April 12th is their deadline. But they did get us some preliminary comments, and we're at a place where now we're not having to make revisions to the sites, the potential sites for housing, but more it was just a little bit with language and that they wanted us to explain things a little bit more in the document itself. That's gone to HCD. We'll get that comment letter from them. It'll likely be a conditional certification upon final adoption of these final revisions. But again, it's just text revisions, not so much the content of the land use side of things. So that's so we're getting close on the housing element, and then we'll just we have to keep moving forward with what we're doing here in the general plan side of things. To get to the point of then eventually updating our zoning.
Do we want to talk a little bit about open space and conservation element? Yeah. You guys all are aware, successful we were in coming to consensus on that element. We did have a few outstanding items, namely the definitions. We've crafted those, compiled those. Those are at the very end of the element now. They were sent to everyone. We're looking to receive any final comments that we would roll into those when we bring back the final package at the last meeting. Also a few, I think there's a couple of edits to the narrative that are in that final edit, that in that final draft that'll be presented at that final meeting. Safety element, that has been through the Public Safety Commission. They spent a lot of time on it. It was a really productive meeting. They had a few tweaks and changes that have been incorporated into the element, the goals and policies of the element, and a few items in the actual narrative. And that will also be rolled into that final package that we'll bring to you at the last GPAC meeting. And Wendy, you want to talk a little about the ACAP?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, now that things have been blessed and there's some things that have been moving forward on the ACAP, we thought it would be an opportunity to showcase the work that you guys have been doing on that area plan. So we coordinated with the city, and the application has been submitted to the American Planning Association LA chapter for consideration for an APA award. So we'll see how that goes and see what other things get submitted. And hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that there'll be recognition for all the hard work that you guys did. So
And then one last thing on the ACAP, it's actually, the document itself there's a few zoning ordinance amendments that are being crafted and processed, or we're developing those that will be going to the Planning Commission and the City Council that will essentially serve to activate the document. And as we go forward, the future development along the corridor will have to comply with the intent and purpose of the document. There's a lot of other elements to it that actually required us to develop some other zoning ordinance amendments so that there wasn't a conflict. So those are getting worked on, and those should be going through the Planning Commission and City Council late spring and summertime.
So what's nice to see is, you always wonder with a general plan, all this work, are we actually seeing implementation? And so that's kind of nice because that's been carved out. There are some, discrete things that can be done and baby steps that are moving forward. So that's kind of as we're talking about all the elements too, those implementation actions that go with each element, the ACAP is actually one of those that you guys got done early that you were doing with the general plan. So that's a good example of the types of things that you'll see come out of the actions that you guys come up with.
I got a question. Should we be lucky to win an award on a economic development plan for the Artesia corridor? What's the true implementation to get this to market? It's basically a planning document at this point, and the execution is what's going to make this worthwhile. In the eyes of planners, it may look like it's a successful document, but in the business side, what's our true rollout effort?
I think that's what Sean was talking about. We're going to have the ordinance amendments for implementation, and as well, concurrently, we're doing a study for updating the parking standards. That was, definitely addressed as a concern and like a barrier for the redevelopment of that area. So we're already starting to work on that as well. SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, has just rolled out a grant program for some interim measures for just this type of parklet and other maybe street improvements. So we're going to look at that grant opportunity for what the recommendations were out of ACAP and maybe implementing those there. So we're already starting to get rolling on the implementation measures.
Thank you, Brenda.
Sheila, do you have a quick question?
Uh-oh. Again.
When do you need to lean into your microphone?
I'm sorry.
What? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
I didn't move. I don't know what's going on.
Just to tag onto Chair Barrow's question, is the city planning on collaborating with the Chamber of Commerce or the business community to activate the ACAP plan?
I know that the Waterfront Economic Development Department is, they have a strategic planning item that's, on the City Council strategic plan to really look at the business improvement district idea and concept and what can we do next to help move that forward. A lot of this is going to be collaboration with the different organizations as we move forward, depending on what, which component we're working on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Right. Next is a little bit, I already gave you a teaser and we sent emails. So for those of you that haven't had a chance to take a look or just to set the tone for what we're trying to achieve in this meeting, we have started to put together a general overview outline of the land use element. We wanted to walk you through a little bit of our thought process and where our brain is going at this point and how we're starting to see after a review of the old policies that you have, looking at, and we'll go through these quickly in a minute, your vision, your guiding principles, the things that you guys established in the beginning, and based upon kind of your experience and seeing the level of detail that was put in the open space element, just our thoughts on where to go, and the ideas of the types of things that we're including. And so we just want to see if we got it right. I have questions at the end, so we'll kind of walk through just setting the stage for it all, some of the changes that the council approved to do a refresh our memory, because that was a big meeting a long time ago of all the things that are in or out. So we wanted to revisit those so you guys would, be able to have that fresh in your memories as we go through everything. And then really, like I said in the beginning, it's a listening session for us. So if there's a thing that was addressed in the old, element that you want to make sure remains, or a topic that hasn't been discussed and is really important that we haven't outlined in some way, the goal here is to kind of shift the way we've done it in the past. Like, we gave you an element based upon the observations we had, but we wanted you guys to be able to put your fingerprint on it early, so that way we could already be drafting and writing to those things, so that when you get the element, it's reflective of the things that are important to you and your priorities as an advisory committee. And if we can't address them, or if they're addressed somewhere else, then we'll also, put that in our presentation for next time about how that will be, how we'll touch on each one of those. So you guys are familiar with the vision. There's a lot of important ideas in here about what you want to be as a community, what you want to look like, what kind of housing you want, how you want your businesses to function, what kind of transportation you want to see. And so we took a view of this and started to put some of those little ideas based upon these topics that we're suggesting about what we were starting to pull from and why we were organizing in these topics. Same thing for the guiding principles. There were 3 big ideas that came out of the guiding principles, which really relate around your community character and livability, your economic prosperity and sustainability, and then health and vitality. And we know, that health is a big priority for the community. That's been something that's been important for quite some time. So as you'll also see, when we look at these things and you start to look at land use, and we look at what you've done in open space and conservation, there's a lot of overlap, because there's some things that you'll see relate to open space, because we have to talk about them in land use, and they cross. So, a lot of these things can be organized in a bunch of different ways. So we'll work with you guys and find the way that it makes the most sense for you with those topics. And so I may also need backup from Team City and Hallie on all of these, but just a refresher from the City Council when they were debating and deliberating on the land plan and talking about what we needed to incorporate for housing element. As far as the GPAC recommendations, they left the PCH North, Central, and South recommendations the same with Torrance, Aviation, and Kingsdale. And then they retained, so on the North Tech District, they left alone the designation that was there. So I believe that's industrial, but you'll see on the right, because of the residential overlay, there's a housing overlay on a portion of that as well. So the underlying stayed the same, but the overlay has added a little bit more flexibility to be able to respond to the housing element. The Vaughan site also stays the same. The new land uses were suggested. There was kind of a hybrid of ideas proposed by the Galleria, with Walgreens retaining the current GP designation. And then the Galleria and the area south of it, they accepted your recommendations, but then reduced what was allowed for the residential overlay. And I'm seeing a lot of questions. So maybe what we'll do is, after I get through these, we'll take a quick pause if there's clarification questions that staff can help answer after. On Artesia, they increased the FAR and allowed for hotels and kennels of all uses in that designation. And then there were the additional residential overlay areas, which Sean and Brandy can talk to a little bit more, for Kingsdale, the North Tech District, the area south of the Galleria, the 190th Street. There was the little properties. There was a couple parcels there that they added it to. And then I'm not sure about this FedEx lens crafter space, Brandy. So I don't know.
That's located on the south edge of town and on PCH. It's the old FedEx site that's now vacant, and the LensCrafter site. And just real quick, what the residential overlays are, again, it was to meet the housing element. I know we had a really difficult discussion at the GPAC, at the Planning Commission, at the community, and multiple conversations at City Council. Unfortunately, with our RENA number, we had to determine where we can demonstrate the capacity for the housing. And so there were these 6 areas that have a residential overlay, so they can have the underlying use as well as residential. And it varies. We can certainly make sure that you have the link to our current version of the housing element. And then, of course, when it gets adopted, we'll make sure that you have that. Just so that you can maybe read a little bit more detail on these areas and what the overlays are.
Chair, do we have a moment to take questions while we're on this slide? We have the land use plan changes, and we have changes to the definitions is the next slide.
Absolutely, yes. Let's take one.
All right. Leslie?
Your first bullet says accept GPAC recommendations. 2 meetings ago, after a long absence, we had our first Zoom meeting where we backtracked on a lot of previous really good consensus decisions because of the RENA numbers. And we were promised that our original recommendations would come through clearly to the council, and that the changes that were made that night would be in light of RENA. So the wording in that summary bullet is concerning to me. Do we indeed have a clear story to the council of our original recommendations?
There was definitely a clear, we had multiple presentations at City Council, and we did make it clear what was originally proposed by GPAC, and then what was, what adjustments were made. Certainly nobody was excited about having to make those changes. So that story was told and brought to City Council. So they acknowledged, what it is. So, maybe what we can do, Wendy, is get a little bit more descriptive of where those landed. And it was, maybe if they were different from what the original recommendation is, that we can acknowledge that.
Acknowledge it in a summary for GPAC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That would be good, because there's a very different dynamic in our first time in a virtual environment in that meeting. Thanks.
Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Bureau. Randy, I know that in the course of navigating the housing element, you had conversations with some of the property owners, and now we're presented with something we haven't discussed previously, which is some aspects of the Galleria site. With the change in status for QIC and the change in status for ownership of the Galleria site from QIC, have we had a chance to talk with them and see how amenable they are to certain overlays or changes, or how their project's going to change?
It's actually the overlay is not the Galleria itself. It's the south of Galleria.
Okay.
It's the like living spaces, Sprouts, and south of that. So it's mainly the parking area that will be where the residential overlay could be located. Like I said, I'll make sure that we get you the housing element. The executive summary itself kind of spells out each of these, and then I'll also make sure that we let you know, here's the section where you can read about what those specific areas are.
Okay, but that's still part of their entitlement, though. Even the parking lot.
Their entitlement's still there. It's counted separately. It's not an additional residential overlay on that particular site, on the Galleria, the South Bay Galleria Mall site. It's not adding a residential overlay there. That's remaining as it's approved.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And so council, in addition to the land plan and suggesting edits there, they also reviewed all of the land use designation definitions that you guys reviewed and made recommendations on. And they left the mixed use designation alone, but had some revisions to the commercial neighborhood designation, increasing the FAR along Artesia. They removed the incubator space as a use from the industrial flex type uses. In the public and institutional areas, they removed the reference to residential care facilities for the elderly and reduced the FAR down to 0.75, but with exceptions for City Hall and city annexation site. And those are at 1.25 FAR. So those are higher. In the parks and open space, they reduced the FAR in that area to 0.2. And then they retained, so when you guys had new revisions to some definitions, they pulled back in the definitions for all the residential designations. So they wanted to leave those as is, with the exception of residential high. And then they left all the commercial designations and then the industrial designation for I2. So part of our job and what's a little tricky is, there's revised definitions plus the old ones, which are written a little differently. And so we just have to, that is part of our process, is to figure out how to marry all of them to get all of the recommendations from council to be free flowing with the recommendations that you guys have had that they've retained. They also revised the current general plan designations for RH. So they retained the description, but upped the density to 30 dwelling units per acre. And then the existing commercial uses within residential land use districts are going to be legally non-conforming. So we had talked about at one point, if they were kind of corner commercial, if those were like neighborhood commercial type uses, but they just said that the ones that are there can be legally non-conforming, but that shouldn't be part of the definition. And then in two of the industrial designations, they increased the FAR to 1. And then in the residential overlay areas, Brandy and Sean, do you guys want to talk about these two, or you want me to just read through them? Is there not much to say about them?
No, I think that, you'll see that when we circulate the housing element. Each of, they don't all have exactly the same density, the same dwelling units per acre. It varied, looking at each of those individually. But really what it'll be is that that there can be the underlying use and as well the additional residential use on top of that.
Okay. Sheriff, can we take questions?
Yes, please. Member Light.
Jim,
I hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm a little confused where it says retain current GP definitions for all commercial designations. I mean, we went to some length to define like what upper, Torrance Boulevard was and lower, and they were different, and they scrapped all that. Previously, you said they accepted the changes we made to those areas, and we certainly made different we called them different things than what they're called today.
Well, the difference, and Hallie, you can help me because I know you went through and looked at this a little bit. The difference is it was the residential land use. That was commercial and residential. But no, they kept so they scrapped all the stuff that you guys had. They went back to the original designations.
Wendy, that is one of the needles that we're trying to thread, is the direction from City Council was to accept certain areas where GPAC to accept GPAC recommendations in certain areas where we had proposed new land use designations. And then in a later meeting, the City Council didn't accept those new land use designations. So that is, in some of those areas, it's.
Well, it kind of contradicts what you said on the previous slide where the City Council accepted, like what we did on Torrance Boulevard. Then here it says, it just keeps all the commercial designations. So that isn't accepting what we did.
Right. I suppose the first one was really talking about map changes, but that's a fair point. We can revise this.
The slide on the first one was all about the land use map, and then this is about the actual definition and how it's described.
Yeah, but the land use map had different designations for commercial.
Yes, and that is part of the conflicting resolution.
When we went,
If this is true, they basically scrapped all our work.
yeah, when they went through it, they did look at the commercial. So for example, the commercial neighborhood, they maintain that. But when they went through the other commercial designations, they talked about like, well, that's just like what, this is current, not just like, but that, like what the FARs were and such. So that we were able to tie in what the other commercial and how that matched. But they went through the definitions. They did go through the entire list and determine what they wanted to move forward with.
So can I ask a question then? Sorry, Member Light, did you have a?
No, I'm still confused. It sounds like they did it, but they didn't. So I don't get it. We called stuff like, I forget, commercial, neighborhood serving commercial and then office type commercial. I forget the exact designations. It sounds like they just scrapped that and went back to this, C1, C2s and all of that.
Yeah, they kept the commercial neighborhood that was recommended by the GPAC, but the other designations, yeah, they went back to what was already in the plan.
So either Brandy or Wendy, can you clarify for all of us basically what this council direction really means to us? So we have council direction, and this is basically essentially a receive and file for us, or are we supposed to, request that we bring back some of the things that we worked on so hard? Or are they just letting us know this is the decision they made and this goes back to city council, or is this goes?
Yeah, no, we're just letting you know that this is the city council. The city council considered all those recommendations, whether it was the map, the looking at the focus areas, and then, where they wanted to do residential overlays. And then as well, they went through the definitions, and then they made a decision. They did take into consideration. We went through and Wendy, did a great job of explaining why the GPAC was, considering these different changes to definition, but this is where they landed. So this is what we're going to be moving forward with.
So, okay, so this goes to the land use document that's going to go to public vote?
Yeah, this will go in the land use element.
Okay.
So what we're saying is these are, when you see things in the plan, and if you're going, hey, where are our definitions? Okay. We're trying to show you the bullet points that we're going through, and we're checking off saying, this is the direction we got from city council. And so now how do we go back and modify your original recommendations to fold these in? And, as far as their direction, we keep everything that you guys had with the exception of these things. So we're trying to give you a highlights of what that is. So you won't be surprised when the plan comes back and certain things are or aren't in there. You'll know where that's coming from.
Okay. So we're not being asked for direction, we're just being told what happened. So,
right. This is the first that we've been able to really update you on where the city council landed on when they've had all of their discussions on the land use.
Okay, so if we have are we going to have another public meeting of where we present this, or just an outreach meeting for the general plan?
There will be for the final general plan, all the elements that are being updated.
Okay. And we're just basically going to say we worked really hard, but the council changed a whole bunch of stuff.
We've certainly made sure that people understood why things needed to be changed.
Okay. All of us who are there, and if we're going to be explaining this to other folks,
we will definitely go through the history of the general plan. The general plan advisory committee worked very diligently, did come up with land. It will go through that history that we've been telling, as we've been having to make modifications to the land use, and exactly why, that we had a RENA number that we have to comply, with the regulations of the state. And that required changes, that the city council made those final revisions. And this is the city council's revisions to the recommendations from the GPAC.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. Member Light, you still have your hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Member Lamb.
From a process perspective, once you come back with the element, where does it go next? Does it go to the Planning Commission, then back to the council, and then to the public? What is that process?
Go ahead. Do you want to take it, Brandy, or you want me to do it?
No, you go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. So the process will be, we will work through the land use element with you. So we actually have 2 more meetings to go through land use with you. So you'll see the draft next time. So we're going to give it to you. Our goal is to have it to 2 weeks ahead so you can look at it and compare and make notes. And then you'll go through the edits just like you did last time with Hallie on open space and conservation, because you guys have that process down. Then after that, the very last meeting, we're skipping to the end slides, by the way, so we can go, we won't have to do the bullets on those. But what will happen is at the last meeting, we're going to package everything up and say, here's all the elements that you guys have either seen, or the safety element that was done by the Public Safety Commission, and kind of present it to you and go, okay, does this, we made the edits. This is what we heard. Did we catch everything that we've talked about? It's that one last time to bless it. And the idea would be that based upon that final package, you go, hey, as GPAC, we believe that this is the best thing. This is the best draft that we could provide in the most compromises based upon everything we've gotten from council and the community and everything to date. From that, we will take it out to the public and go, guess what? Our elements are all ready for public review. We'll take public comment on those and feedback. Then it will go to Planning Commission and Council with all the feedback from you guys as GPAC, from the community. Here's the edits or policy changes we want, or here's whatever else. So that will be all packaged. We'll present that to Planning Commission and Council, and then they'll take action on it as well. In the meantime, in between, and so this sounds really compact and fast, but it's not, because we still have to do the environmental review that has mandatory times, and we have a scoping meeting and some other things. But from a land use plan and getting all of the elements together, that's generally the order that it goes. So the next time it goes out to the public, it will be the package of all of the general plan elements, and then all the comments will go to Planning Commission and Council.
So there's opportunity then for continued edits or changes. I'm referencing Jim's comments. There still will be opportunity for these edits as we move forward. Am I correct with that?
The edits would come only after planning. It's the same thing, like with the land plan, you guys made your recommendations to Planning Commission. So they looked at it, they made their recommendations to council. So the edits will come after council gives us final direction to say, we want this in, we don't want this in, change it, just like they did on the land plan, the stuff that we're going over with you right now. So there will be opportunity for the public to comment individually on things that they want to see in there. And then it's up to the council to give us direction as to whether or not that gets folded in. So we won't be going through another round of the public and then hearing it, revising the draft, revising it for Planning Commission, because we don't know if council would give us that direction. So we just present it all the way up and let them be the final deciders on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lamb. Member Funabashi, you still want to ask a question?
No, it was really just more of expressing the sentiment that I'm picking up. I think all of us on the GPAC understood that we were the first body to kind of work through all the exercises, knowing that it would go to mayor and council, to Planning Commission. I think the big underwriting factor, which you answered, is will GPAC have another opportunity to take a bite at the apple? And obviously, as citizens in the community, whatever public hearings come about, and what other opportunities we might have. But I think it's probably important just to understand that some on this body are probably upset, and maybe even a little disappointed that the changes that were made by mayor and council, but it is pretty much understood clearly that we weren't the final end all be all body anyway. We're just advisory. And as long as we have an opportunity to express our what we really would continue to see, with however we feel things should go, as long as we know that we have that opportunity, it seems clear that we will. And ultimately, the whole idea is to craft something that is going to be voted positively when that time comes as well. So,
Thank you. Member Light.
Yeah, well, I just want to rebut that a little bit. I feel like if they felt like they could just use 1992 designations, they should have just saved us the time. This was I feel betrayed, and like this was a total waste of 2 years of my evenings inputting to this for them to not even consider changes to the commercial. I can see the RENA wasn't in their power, but this is, I mean, we're basically giving them back the 1992, as far as land use, the 1992 document updated for RENA. So I'm not going to support this from a vote perspective.
All right, I know. It's, so what do we do now? We just,
Well, we're still on task to create an element, and I understand, and I sat through the meeting as well, and I know the positions that you guys took, and so I think at this point, some of the things that I'm like, okay, what are the things we can still shape? I mean, you guys overhauled the open space element. When we go through what we're talking about for the goals and policies for the land use, there's still a lot. I think what you'll see is if you've read through some of the policies, there's a lot of room for improvement and the implementation and direction of things that can get done. So if we can focus on that part for now, that's the thing we have the power to influence and change and really shape. So that's what I'd like to keep going through with you guys.
Member Szymanski.
Yeah, quickly, I'm just wondering if there might be an opportunity to invite them or invite us to them to give us an explanation of, maybe even a time capsule explanation, like a half hour, that would say, what the rationale was. And not to say that would be the finality of it, but at least that could be a stage in our more comprehensive understanding of what was done and where we are. That's it.
Thank you, Member Szymanski. Member Moses.
I watched that city council when they changed the city council meeting when they changed these land use designations. Yeah, we worked on it for 2 years. They worked on it for about an hour and a half. So they just simplified it so they could understand it, and that's fine. That's what they're going to do. As Mr. Funabashi said, we're just the first step in the process. We can make our recommendations, and it's somebody else's call after that. If members of the GPAC aren't interested in supporting this at this point, they're welcome to check out. We don't really need to hear from them anymore. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Moses. I think all of us will get a chance to include our final recommendation with the final document. And it's something that we talked about from the beginning. And I think this is probably the time to start, penning that letter that's going to go with our final vote. So I think there's going to be some very good writing here from members here of what we believe. And as Member Lights spent, or the years that was spent for it to be unraveled so quickly. But again, we were the first step in the process, and we'll move forward with that. Member Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. My recollection of that meeting was that the definitions were presented in relationship to the housing element. And the council indicated that they were not prepared to make the changes to the definitions at that point in time. The general sense was that they were open to exploring the issue more fully when the land use element was being put together. Their position was it didn't appear to them to be relevant to change the definitions simultaneously to the housing element, partly because of the complexity of the housing element. So I hope that clarifies.
Well, Commissioner, actually the topic was the land use plan. And because they had to look at the entirety of the land plan and map. And so that was the topic for every single one of those discussions. And when we got to that, we explained that to them. And they did go through all of the definitions.
Yes.
Result of that.
Yes. What I was hearing from them was a frustration in regards to the definitions and taking the time to understand all of those definitions in the context of the housing element. And it went beyond, the definitions went beyond the housing, the residential. It went into commercial. So I'm not suggesting that they weren't looking at the zoning at the time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
We were looking at all of the land use recommendations. So it wasn't just for the housing. The reason we were having the conversation at the time that we were having it was because of the deadlines for the housing element. Those form it. But they definitely were looking at all of the different land use recommendations, not just the housing. And so, it's a lot. It was a lot of information to undertake. And, we had, I think 5 meetings, 5 weeks in a row of a night meeting with them, in addition to the community meeting and the planning commission meeting and, in our GPAC meeting, a few months prior to that. So it is a lot of information that they had to, that they were considering at that time.
I think they would be open to further consideration. I'll just leave it at that.
I think so too. And everybody on this GPAC knows your fellow city councilmen, and I think there's an opportunity to talk to them when this goes back up. So
yes, I agree. Thank you.
Let's keep going then.
Well, who had the over-under bet on an hour? Just kidding. We jinxed that one, didn't we? No, these are all very necessary conversations. So I'm glad we're having them. And so what we want to do, I'll try to keep this part brief because I think it's pretty intuitive. But I just want to share some of the requirements that we have from state law, the things that the land use element has to address. And we have to look at, obviously, the land use map, the distribution of the land uses, where they're located, what the proposed changes are. And then the definitions obviously talk about the the intensity and the density of the uses. So we have to talk about population density and building intensity. So that was part of the definition. We have to look at areas that are prone to flood, but we've done that in the safety element. So sometimes when they talk about state law and what it requires, as long as your general plan addresses it, you can move it into whatever element you want. So it doesn't have to be explicitly in land use. So since we addressed that in safety, that's where it's housed, but we have to look at it. So when we're looking at land use designations, we're not inadvertently putting some sensitive use in a flood zone per se.
Wendy, can I interrupt you for a second? Member Solomon.
Thanks, Chair Bureau. Real quick, Wendy, does these sorts of state requirements, we've got a landing zone over there at Moonstone Park for helicopters over by the Harbor Patrol. Would that be something that'd be considered a state requirement to maintain some sort of emergency evac or area there?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and just see if there's a flight pattern for the helicopters. So I appreciate you bringing that up. We'll double check because a lot of the times if you're in, it's a very obvious, like, if you're next to an airport or you're within the kind of the airport influence area, it's really obvious where those are. But if we have helicopter, we'll take a look at that for sure. So thank you.
I think, committee member Trezan or Commissioner Light would definitely be more versed in that as far as the requirements on what we have to have over there at the mole to land a helicopter for evacuation medical evacuation and so forth.
And Wendy, one of the things on your airport land use side, we are under the influence of the Hawthorne Airport.
Okay.
So maybe LAX is not applicable, but I'll disagree too, because they're changing flight patterns that are affecting the Redondo Beach area. So we're subject to the airspace of Hawthorne.
Okay.
And Torrance Airport. So.
Okay. We'll see where those boundaries are. We'll map them out and see where we fall and what properties are in there then. We'll do a cross check on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So then we get into some of our initial observations and reviewing the plan. You know, I'm sure you guys have lots of exciting leisure reading time on the beach, taking your land use element, seeing what's working or what's not. But, you know, part of what we do is we talk to staff and we see how some of these goals and policies have been working because they're at the counter and they see the projects come in, which ones provide issues, which is there, because you're supposed to look at the general plan for every project. So that's one thing about how it's used. We also just kind of look at it for readability and just how it's going to help you implement the vision that you have. You've got these new visions and guiding principles, and how is that getting you there? And so there are several policies in the plan right now that are just very iterative. And it's kind of like some of the things we have to do this. So for example, one that says allow for the development of private recreational, cultural, educational, and health uses in commercial zones and religious uses. Well, those are in the definition. So that's already allowed. When we're talking about what's allowed in the commercial zones, it's already there. So that policy is not really getting you anything to point you in the direction of where you guys are trying to grow into and evolve as a city. So we want to take some of those and either we just take them out because they're not really useful. It's kind of okay, we have to do that as part of the plan anyway with the definitions, and then clean those up. And I'll show you some of the examples of other uses or policies that we would suggest kind of replacing that. We also have looked at, there are several policies that have zoning code level detail, very detailed. So you could kind of see in the last time that you guys went through the open space and conservation, kind of the level, the higher level view that the policies take. And my understanding, and Sean can back me up on this, but if you look at some of these examples, it talks about a specific FAR on a particular parcel or heights, which we don't generally put in the general plan because those are in the development code. But my understanding was the last time that the general plan was getting updated, the development code, there was some question as to how quickly the development code would get updated after. And so the community wanted some certainty that there were some provisions in place to make sure that this information and requirements were there until the development code got updated. So a lot of this is already in the code. It stays in the code. And so we think that many of those policies can come out because we can show you where they are in the code, and it stays there because that's actually an implementation action happened. So we can pull those out because you have provisions in the code to take care of it. Anything else you want to add, Sean, about that?
I mean, that's it exactly, Wendy. Yeah, but these policies specifically are actual development standards in our zoning ordinance. So they have been picked up. They are codified from the general plan into the zoning ordinance. So, that this level of detail is very uncommon. Zoning ordinance development standards in a general plan. And since they're in our zoning ordinance, we certainly don't need them in our general plan.
Just to reiterate, the reason they were in the last time was just until the zoning could get updated. Well, now it's been updated. So as we're doing this, it's not changing it. There's no point in maintaining that. Yeah. Okay.
Member Light has, you have your hand up. Are you there, or you put your hand up and you left?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I disagree with that assessment to some extent. I think, it's important that in the general plan, we set policy and the actual implementing ordinances are sub-level and they may duplicate what's there. But it's important, I think it's important to telegraph what was the policy that those implementing ordinance were designed to. And I think we're, one of the things that's helped us a couple times is when we tried to change a zoning ordinance and you go back to the policy and you say, well, this was a policy out of the general plan. This is not just something, that should be pencil width. There's a reason they put that in there. And we're losing that if we just bury it in the details.
Yeah, I think one of the things we look at is, the general plan amendments, consistency, that sort of thing. But what would help us, or it would help me to know, are there particular areas, if things have been implemented and built, or, are there specific areas where that's happening, or is it every single one of these code things a reference? Because our normal, when we look at, general plans, we do try to streamline that so that we can make it a little bit easier to implement from the general plan perspective. So if we can
get you as being on the other side of that when they went through and tried to change some zoning ordinance, to be able to go back and cite this isn't congruent with what was decided in the general plan. Yep. And that was the policy at the time.
Yeah, so that's why it would help me to know if it's everything, or if it's, if there are particular areas, if it's mixed use, or if it's what areas are really most important to you guys.
Yeah, maybe Wendy, when we're going through and drafting that, as you're like instead of just like we're, proposing a strike through for those, those are like, we're going to talk, we'll note these to talk about them. Because some of them, it may be something where it's not applicable anymore. Mm-hmm. Maybe some that, like to Jim's point, that are, we really still need to keep that in there. Sure. Because this has been tried to, that it's been attempted to be changed multiple times, and we want to make sure that it stays. So I think that that's a good point, Jim, and I appreciate that history on that.
Yeah, and when we review things, that's how we look at it. We look at it for, is this still relevant and should be preserved? Is this, already been completed, or it's just not relevant anymore, should be deleted? Is it, we need to add new things and modify because of state law or other things? So that's kind of that when we have our kind of table of when we look through it, those are exactly the things. So that feedback would be really helpful.
Member Lamb?
Yes, thank you. To tag on to this conversation, I think it would be helpful for the committee members to have a list of any policies or such as listed here that you want to you're considering to delete.
And to be clear, we deleting is more than what we would do, because to Jim's point again, we still have to. The zoning ordinance has to be consistent with the general plan. So we have to have language that's still going to speak to it. It would just a little higher level.
Like a more broader sort of policy that still gets to the point of what the implementation is of the zoning.
So maybe I should change the word delete to change. Anything that you're, right? Would that be better? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's talk about the general outline that we were starting to ruminate about and see how we could start to come up with the topics and sort things that you already have in your general plan, and then organize them a little bit more into topics that are reflective of your vision and your guiding principles. And, when you start to look at some of these, when we do the general plan, when you look at your current element, some of the basics are always there, where you talk about what's the purpose of the land use plan, what's our planning area. So if people have spheres of influence, what the acreage is. So those are always in every element. What we'll also outline is the land use strategy, about the conversations you've had over the past 2 years about how Redondo should evolve and what kind of change you're planning for, and the considerations about jobs and, the types of people that we're trying to make sure we have housing for, and all of that. So we'll also talk about what that means and for the land use pattern. So when we were talking about the focus areas and different places, about what kind of neighborhoods will stay the same, where the change most likely will occur, those opportunity areas, we'll outline all of that. We'll also have the essentials, where we'll have your definitions. We'll have a build out table so that you'll know exactly how many units, how many square feet, the population, estimated jobs, and it will be broken out by land use. So that will be in there. And we need that as well for the project description for the environmental document. And then we'll have the updated land use map. And we say the focus areas map. I don't know if we're going to call it special policy areas, but it's those areas that you guys call out, like if it's, ACAP or, Riviera Village, or those like landmark special areas that warrant additional special policy guidance because they're special, or you guys want them to become something special and they need additional direction.
And Wendy, real quick, I just wanted to back up onto that build out table.
Yeah.
What we had done the build out analysis when we were submitting our housing element, and then that HCD changed it. And what we realized is we needed to get to the place where HCD was going to stop saying, well, you need to find more sites for housing, you need to change your densities and things like that. And we're finally to that point. I think that, like I said, that April 12th letter that we're hoping to get from HCD will have that. And we have to have that in order to really move forward with the environmental. So I just wanted to let you understand a little bit of the timing and like how, it's like we can finally talk about the land use and have, start filling out all this information, but the housing element kind of drove that. So, back to committee member Lamb's point about last year's conversation was those were, two very blended conversations of the housing element and the land use. So, yeah, thank you.
And the build out will be different than what the last build out that the advisory committee saw, because we've been waiting to update the whole build out until we've gotten the okay from HCD that the land uses aren't changing. So we're not continually updating that and spending time. So we'll be providing that updated build out to you as well in the plan. So you'll see it all pulled together. Okay. So then we started to think bigger picture and a little bit more broadly about some of the proposed goals and policies topics, and they look a little bit different than the ones that you had previously. And so where we were starting to think this could go is, and I'll walk through what we're thinking would be in each so that you guys could see. We have balance, identity, compatibility, health and vitality, economic sustainability, historic preservation, and then whatever we call it, focus areas, the special policy areas. And then that would include those residential overlay. We'll have to figure out what's showing up in housing and then what we need to say about it in land use so that those two go together. So, and this is where the memo that you guys received of the outline, it was kind of the brainstorm. So I'm sorry if it seemed a little odd and it wasn't, consistent on all of the different topics. It was because we were just pulling a few examples from what you guys currently have, some ideas from what we've seen before, just so you could get a flavor of the tone and the types of things. It doesn't mean these are the exact policies, the numbering's not there, but it's just kind of an intention and a mindset. And so when on balance, there's a lot of reference to balance. In some cases, it's talking about the built environment with green spaces in your guiding principles. You're balancing economic development opportunities for residents and businesses. You want to have like a place for recreation and what is that? Commerce. I don't know what that word is. And, or maybe it's commerce for residents and visitors alike. So there's a balance of those types of uses, recreation versus commerce. So there's a kind of an overarching theme of balance in there. And so some of the examples of your existing goals, I was trying to pull out what balance could be. Balance could be, providing a type and mix of uses that's necessary for future residents. So there's a balance of uses there. We could look at, maintaining that balance of fundamental existing land uses and commercial, and then providing new opportunities for this as intensification or reuse. So you'll start to see these are some of the things you have in there already, but we're trying to regroup a little bit. And then it's like increasing the supply of residential units that are available and affordable for households of very low, and moderate. So that's the balance of, of affordable housing and then market rate housing. So there's a balance theme. but maybe these don't go, as we write it, it kind of evolves. We try to group them, and sometimes it's like, hey, this is not really the topic that goes, and we group them separately, but this is sort of where we were headed.
Wendy, can I interrupt you for a second?
Of course.
Member Sharzan?
Can you go back a slide? Thank you. These are the proposed goals and policies for what?
The topics. So they're header topics for the land use element.
Okay.
So Leslie, the next slide was going over the balance and kind of what
Yeah,
we're thinking about that.
that's
We'll
what
go through each of those. Yeah.
What was glaringly absent from this slide was, maybe it's buried in balance, but I wasn't seeing it on the next slide, was quality of life and livability. So I don't know. I guess I'll hold my further thoughts till we're through these, but I'm a little skeptical on these top bullets.
Yeah, and it may be the details that we provide in the policy get there, and it's just the grouping header. So if what I'm hearing is quality of life and livability is important to you, then that's what we've got to make sure is addressed in the plan. So it might either be its own header, or it might be, like you said, in a policy below one of those.
Yeah, and on one hand, that's fine. But if this is like just coming, like maybe these are like headings from a planner's point of view, but at the same time, I think the headings are important for the citizens. And so maybe we do want to tweak the headings, but I'll see how we get to the end before I comment further. Thanks.
Member Light?
Yeah, I don't know when we're going to provide comments to this, but some of the stuff I thought was missing was, protecting existing affordable units in the community. I don't see that in here. I don't see that idea of prioritizing the attraction of high-end office space, institutional and tech commercial to improve the workforce jobs balance. We generally say that, but not specifically, which I thought we spent some time on in our definitions, and that was the goal or the policy that backed some of those designations we made. And then the one piece I keep feeling like we're missing, and we've seen it abused time and time again, is that how we count open space on private, especially the commercial and industrial development.
Thank you, Member Light. Member Lamb?
Yes, first, thank you so much for your efforts to put this together. My first general comment is this is a land use element that is used in the development of our land. And it's hard for me to see with, certainly with balance and identity, how these goals can be implemented in a concrete way. And in the type of zoning that we already have. So I'll leave it at that for now. But again, this document is implemented as a land development document. And I'm not able to see how these goals translate to that implementation. So thank you.
And I appreciate all that feedback. How about this? Will you humor me for, I don't know, I'll try to go fast, 7 minutes so I can go through what you guys have and some of the ideas of what we were showing so we can get you to more of those concrete ideas of what we're thinking. Because the feedback that we're getting, from Commissioner Light, if we're saying prioritize office use, I love that. To me, that might go under economic sustainability because that's a strategy that you guys want to, market. Or maybe it's not. There's a lot of different ways we could write this. And so that's why hearing some of these things about protecting the affordable units, prioritizing office use, that is all great because we would be pulling we did not go through the whole element and pull everything out right now. These are just samples. And so that feedback that I'm getting right now is very helpful to me of those things that are most important to you. So I can highlight some of those examples that we were seeing as the types of things that are a little bit more concrete. And then if there are continue to be those topics, we can make sure that those things get organized somewhere. And then you can let me know if these hierarchy, if the higher names, if you will, for the goal groupings are still appropriate. Or it's like, this one's still a little ambiguous. See what we can put in there, but we might rename it. That's fine too. We got to start somewhere. But we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to help us shape it so we knew which direction to be aiming. Brandy, were you going to say something?
Well, I'm waiting for you to go to the next slide.
Oh, okay.
So just going back to, where did we come up with these categories? Just as a reminder, because I know we talked about it at the beginning of the presentation. We've had a lot of discussion since. A lot of what we went back to was to the vision and the guiding principles to kind of think about where, how could we categorize, the goals and policies. Again, that, the renaming of that can happen. But when Wendy and Hallie were first starting to look at, some of the goals that we already have, how can they fall under these categories, yet, while still reflecting those guiding principles, it seemed that we could. And as Wendy mentioned, these are examples. These are not all of the goals that we think that would go under this, but just showing how we have existing goals that could really fall under here.
Member Gaddis.
Yeah, not to harp on slide 14 so much, but a couple things are missing there. One is environmental sustainability, and the other one is energy and water use sustainability as goals. But I don't know, are we going to have a chance to circle back on this thing and sort of bat it around a bit?
Yeah. Because there's no meat on this. Was just for me to give you the structure so I could show you and go through. So I have slides on each one of these about the types of things.
All right.
And so I love this. It's like, okay, make sure I'm hearing energy and water use are important. And,
and environmental sustainability.
Yep. Okay. And what does that mean when you say, can I ask a clarification question while I have you? Yeah. What does that mean to you? What does environmental sustainability mean to you?
Smog, trash, especially washing into the ocean. I mean, these are problems we have right now. Runoff, which, has all sorts of chemicals and oil from cars and things like that. Noise, air pollution, especially from that we have right now from the power plant with thousands of tons of particulate and other poisons being pumped into our air. Yeah, we have a lot of issues with regards to environmental sustainability. And also traffic. And, we have a lot of F intersections and cars sitting there pumping out exhaust into our F intersections. I mean, we can feel anyone who has any outdoor living space with furniture out there is having to hose it off because of all the grit and particulate, from tire wear and exhaust from cars. So, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of issues. I mean, I could go on and on. I'm not going to because I'd like the meeting to be efficient, but yeah, real issues.
No, that's great. And, some of the things overlap with like the circulation element, which we're not updating. So there will be things, we will find a way to tie. There's always overlap because there's gonna be overlap with safety, with open space, and land use kind of pulls that all together. So we'll make sure we've got a touch point on that.
And Wendy, when we went through the open space, we that element did note where, where something was, where it did overlap with another element.
Yeah, we do that. We'll cross-reference. Say, don't forget to check open space for, we'll have those little side boxes to say, check open space for this. And then we can do a cross-reference. We always have to go back, even when we're done with all the elements, and make sure if there's a cross-reference and we know there's a reference to open space and land use, we'll go put that side box in the open space element so that people know that there's multiple opportunity or places that open space is talked about. So so this is what I was trying to get to is some of the goals and policies ideas. So for balance, we start getting the, sustainable community, a spectrum of land uses, offers a variety of employment, commercial, recreational. The goals are really high. It's like what we want to be, right? And housing opportunities make it possible for people of all ages and abilities to live, work, recreate, and maintain a high quality of life in Redondo. So that's why I'm trying to figure out, we're hearing Leslie wants that quality of life, the livability. We start getting those words when we start getting into some of the goals. So then some of the policy ideas could be things like balanced land use patterns, preserving residential neighborhoods. That's what we talked about. You have some of those goals and policies already. We start pulling those in. Inclusivity about, mix of uses, diversity of housing. So, but I put some other bullets about coastal policies, the public facilities and infrastructure. So I think Commissioner Gaddis, that would start to get into what you're talking about as having some of that infrastructure that's responsive and looking at your air quality. I think air quality could be in livability later too and sustainability, but that might be another spot where Commissioner Light's question or, ideas about prioritizing office use could be in there too, because we're trying to balance housing with jobs and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of places these things can go. So when we look at identity, we were pulling from the vision that was talking about what you guys see yourselves as, and it's a large city, but you have that charm of the small town. You're a seaside city, so that's that coastal identity and a casual beach culture, high quality of life. Your guiding principles talk about community character and livability. So even livability could be, this is kind of where we were thinking the design type policies would go. So when we're looking at your distinctive character, your architecture, signage, getting to some of the things that we were pointing to in the ACAP, that's where we would start integrating some of the ideas under identity. But there's a lot of things. You'll see any of these things, you're like, oh, we want this policy to go up here. It could probably move around to something else. Another goal idea would be talking about, health-oriented neighborhoods, commercial districts that have a positive sense of identity and belonging for residents, visitors, and businesses. Looking at compatibility. So even in identity, we can talk about compatibility with adjacent residential uses and commercial. And we know that's a big issue for you guys, is that how do these uses all work together? But that could also be just addressed in compatibility. When we're looking at things like walking distance, what does it mean to make that community character? We'll start talking about those features in the identity and saying this is what's important to preserve or to seek to do more of. And then that's that high level of design quality that's sensitive to context, looks at your public spaces, your streetscapes, and creating those attractive, safe developments. And so that's why I was talking about, you guys already have like an implementation action for this section would be something like the residential design guidelines that you guys have in progress right now. That would be, create residential design guidelines to create an area plan for this area that doesn't have it, do these types of things. So that's how we see that kind of stepping through in the high level identity topic. Any questions there? Okay. We were suggesting compatibility. Oh, I didn't get away.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm teasing.
I like the on the previous slide. So you talked about the design guidelines and identity. So I wonder if you could take just a minute to talk about how you would integrate identity into the design guidelines. I think that's what you were implying. Is that correct?
To me, it's the design guidelines would help implement this policy. So when you say we want to create a coastal identity or small town or do this or create, whatever you talk about for your identity, that is the actual tool. Like the zoning code is the tool that implements the general plan. The ACAP and the provisions are implementing your big ideas for what's going on Artesia. Those are the actual planning document. I mean, general plan's a planning document too, but the day-to-day, and Brandy, I don't know if you're shaking your head. Yes.
Yeah.
You can jump in.
Yeah. So Sheila, with and we're calling them objective residential design standards. That's what we're creating.
Right.
And the reason is they have to be objective. We're making sure that they're standards and they're measurable. and implementable. And with that, we have evaluated and looked at and received feedback on different neighborhoods. Are there certain neighborhoods that need to have even, more that needs to be addressed in those standards? And then as well, just in general, there's a pattern to how the community developed. And if there are some distinct, components to that are still in place, we want to make sure that we continue those on. And so, it will be continued both in the identity of the community as a whole, when we're like, all R1 is going to have, these different components to it. All of R1A, we're going to be looking at this. All of the multifamily will have this. So it will have that, and it's based on where what our community has now. We can't just say, well, it's got to kind of fit with the neighborhood character. You have to have the objective, but we are trying to figure out how do we make it happen. So it's the identity of that. And then also there may be some neighborhoods that will have something specific. For example, the avenues already in our current residential design guidelines have, requirements for access on the alleys in the avenues. And it's a very distinct, defined area.
So if I'm a developer, and I come in and I'm reading the land use element that says identity, then, and you have the design standards, correct? How does the developer, how does this identity issue impact the developer?
They're just going to know what they can and can't do on their property based on those standards. But this will definitely support having those objective design standards.
It calls out that this is something that's important that you guys care about. It starts in that bigger vision in your general plan, and it's carried through. So the general plan says these things are important, or we need to identify, the distinct character, or it's like maintain the distinct character of if you identify special neighborhoods. Remember in the very beginning, we were kind of doing that neighborhood map, and then people are like, well, that's kind of a neighborhood, but don't forget this. You really look at, the fabric. And we can just go through. And then the thing is, we're not going to be able to resolve at the level of detail that Brandy has been working on with the objective design guidelines or ACAP. You know how long that took to get through. So what it says is, these are important to us. These warrant additional study or additional, analysis and protection if we think they're important. So then the council says, yeah, we agree, we need additional standards. And then you put those in place and that's what's there. So that should be the tool to implement what needs to be done there. But then you can point back, like we were talking earlier, the general plan said something should be done here, but it doesn't say exactly what, because there's not time to figure out everything.
And I do think, Committee Member Lamb, I think it's important because, to have that supports the objective standards, because, we have a lot of different developers that are like, oh, well, I shouldn't have to comply. Well, why is this here? Well, if we can now go back to here's the general plan, and it is supportive of us having this. And we do, have this update. It's something that we can update more regularly than every 17, 18, 19 years. 20 years. We're getting there.
But it needs to set a floor, but it should not set a ceiling. Because so that's sort of the danger of design guidelines is, yes, it needs to set a floor so folks can basically meet that design standard, but it should never set a ceiling because somebody can come in and want to do something. And then hence the objective of the design review portion of the planning commission, that a project should stand on its merits. And if it's a little better, a little bit different, then it should be considered. So.
Right. And I mean, the point, and I don't want to, I could go down this path for a while, but the point is if this is supportive of having objective residential design standards, and we have those objective design standards adopted, and then, designer so-and-so says, I don't like that, and I don't think I should have to follow it. We can keep pointing back to, this is really important to the community. This is like long-term important vision for the community.
Right, right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for that explanation.
Member Solomon?
Thank you, Chair Bureau. And you've touched on my question a little bit, both Wendy and Brandy here. We don't really have a uniform identity in the sense that the city is not the same everywhere. You've got the TRW tract is very different than a lot of our historical districts. The village has a character of its own. The Coast Highway, Artesia, they all have a distinct look and feel to them that I think that the residents would want to maintain. So you've got sort of an overall header, to use your term, Wendy, but then you have subsets of neighborhoods. Is it to our advantage to have a subtext like we talk about Old Torrance or Walteria, and everybody knows what that is in Torrance? Is it to our advantage to have a subset of identity and identifiable neighborhoods to set an expectation of what the design standards are in that area, or is that too limiting to Chair Bureau's point?
Yeah, I think it'd be too limiting maybe on the general plan side of things, but it is something that we're evaluating. We're going to have those descriptors in the design standards themselves. And, maybe it doesn't hurt to like call out some of those examples, just in a more descriptive way, just to give an idea of why it's important to address identity. And we can certainly, coordinate having that consultant get the information and the descriptors that we've been working on to.
I think it's a helpful way to, for lack of a better way of putting it, to sell the city.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're very, there are all kinds of neighborhoods that, we're like, oh yeah, and this is, and how do they identify themselves? The feedback from the community was pretty amazing. We had almost 1,000 survey results back. So it's really, really
well, it's
exciting.
helpful to know that that's a logical or accepted way to view it, because I think it'll be helpful.
Yeah. And, in cities like Palm Springs, they have like a whole, it's so big there, it's evolved. They have like a whole neighborhood coordination officer because the architecture there is so strong and, there's distinct, historic buildings and everything else. So, it could be like the first step is identifying the neighborhoods, because that was always a thing. Is this parcel in? Is that part when we started in the very beginning? Or, Brandy already said they've got something going, and there's already been neighborhood identification in the work that they're doing. So you might be able to pull from there. And it might be in our narrative. We could say, this Redondo Beach is comprised of an eclectic mix of neighborhoods, and we could have a picture of some of the key neighborhoods and say why it's special, and that could be part of the narrative, and that would be fine. And then it could be just having a more broad policy about how it's important to keep the character of these individual neighborhoods and assess what that means, and then figure out what the implementation action is for that.
And developers and investors all have their own particular subset of work that they like to do. A lot of them typically build out a specific type of project or specialize in certain types of projects, whether they be high density or low density, whether they be something that's a planned unit development that's built around a courtyard or other amenities and things like that. And if you have identifiable neighborhoods that sort of design standard has been accepted and is welcome, then I think that could be helpful.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Member Pinsler.
The thing about Palm Springs is that every place has an entity, has a name, every area. I think one of the things you get into here is that, well, we'll have the et cetera neighborhood. We will have trees, we will have this, we will have that, and then we'll have all the others. And that will exacerbate a dynamic that has been going on in the city for 30, 40 years of haves and have-nots. I think that's problematic to start in that. I think that design guidelines are of use, but they can get to strangle you. Look at Laguna Beach. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned about, we're flailing this document with first of all, things that may or may not ever happen, thus wasting all of our times, and making it so that we can perhaps focus on the one bright, shiny object that is never going to go anywhere. So we should think about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So did I go through compatibility? And you asked me to go back? Or no, we did not go through it yet, right? So we talked a little bit about compatibility. So I was pulling some of the things. There's not something that explicitly talks about compatibility in the vision or guiding principles, but you can interpret your sustainability and the way that the community evolves and how those relationships between land uses work in the first statement. And then when we're talking about community character and livability, that's also kind of compatibility. It's like, what is your experience living here? And so some of your existing goal says ensure the types of land uses developed in the city complement and do not adversely affect the quality of life and health of city's residents. So I think that's going back to committee member Shanann's question about quality of life. Are we getting there by some of these statements, or do we need a separate topic for that? I'm not sure. So we'll just keep going. Some of the ideas that we have from other areas, a goal is, creating compatible residential, commercial, and industrial development that's sensitively integrated with the existing community and minimizes impacts on surrounding uses. So you can see that's very high level. And now with the policy, that's where we start to bring it down and getting into some of the details that you guys are talking about. So that's where this was an example of context aware appropriate building design. So if we're talking about relationships to scale or walkability or the purpose of the corridors that uses are adjacent to, we talk about those transitions. So compatibility could go here, it could go in design, it could go, there's a lot of places it could go. So we're trying to have these overarching broad enough topics that we can pull a lot of ideas of what you guys have into them. And I don't know, it might, as we move forward, we might find that there's 2 or 3 more, even as we're drafting them, in addition to the comments that you guys are giving us, because we're trying to put it in these and these don't really make sense, or this really warrants its own. So did you guys want to talk about compatibility at all, or does that give you a sense? We're good on that one. I'm going to keep going because I promised an hour. So health and vitality, because we know, your blue zone city, health is very important. Coastal city, lots of recreation activities. That's something you guys are known for. You put it in your vision about being a health-oriented community and outdoor living, and that you have parks and open space amenities that are vital. That's integrated into who you are as a city. You have an existing goal that talks about ensure that all of these uses complement and don't adversely affect. You didn't have anything that explicitly said health and vitality, but when you're looking at livability and impacts of life and health on the city's residents, this is where that would fit.
I've got something to add to this one, and I think noise is one of the things that we don't really weigh in on the importance to health and to vitality. I think with the advent and the popularity of electric cars and the fact that they produce less noise, and I think there's an opportunity for the city to consider the reduction of noise, especially in high traffic areas. Like Manhattan Beach Boulevard, that can be done by reducing speed limits and by providing paved surfaces that are smooth and consistent, and by having sound walls and encouraging those in high traffic areas. So noise pollution is extraordinary and very, I'm not gonna say very bad for health, but it's something that needs to be looked at and should be considered.
And maybe we tie that to, because we have a noise element. And that one is that's not part of our update. We'll be updating the contour map as part of the environmental, but we can tie it to, and maybe I don't need to respond to all of these now. We'll just take the ideas, but that's one that you can tie back to livability and uses, and then we'll point to the noise element. And then when that gets updated, there'll be implementation actions that go with it. Or there might be like holding bin things that we put on the side that we say are important. And then if they relate to traffic or, circulation or noise, the elements that we're not updating, those will be ready. And it's that list of when the city's going to update those. These are the things, some of the things to start with, because the GPAC already recommended. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So this was the economic sustainability. And obviously you've got your guiding principle that talks about your economic prosperity and sustainability. We talk about those jobs, housing balance, the retail goods and services, desired development. We're looking at, fiscal impacts. So making sure that, businesses that come in are contributing to your economy, looking at business retention and expansion. And so maybe these are broad, but this might be the place where we could talk about the more specifically talking about office. When we're, in the very beginning, when we talk about the things that the city cares about and is important, creating these jobs, we need office space, 95% of people commute out. We can bring that back and get more explicit about the types of uses we're trying to attract and what we need to go after here. So I think this would be the home for that. I'll just keep rolling through because we're almost done. And then that way I can just sit and listen and take notes on some of the things. Historic preservation came up for this community character and livability and preserving. You have a bullet in the guiding principles talking about preserving your heritage and history. You do have a lot of interesting history and landscapes and neighborhoods and landmarks. So I think you guys have a preservation ordinance right now, Sean? Yeah, and Brandy?
Yeah, we do. One of the things that for those of you who might follow, that we're looking to put forward in a budget, whether it's a budget response report, is updating the survey of properties, whether they might be able to qualify or not qualify, and then as well just updating the ordinance itself. So, it is something that's very important. And it's not something that's just citywide. It's not the same as the residential design standards. This is very specific to the property. We do evaluations on each of the properties that are on our survey list. Even if they're, the A and B properties automatically go through our ordinance, the C and D rated, we still have to evaluate them. Do they, let's see what the conditions are. Sometimes they don't, they no longer have that historic context. So this is very important in the community. But I do think that there's, some room for some additional policies on this.
Member Light?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just had a question on whether, lately we've seen developers and others trying to quantify mid-century modern as a historic use. So would you update, before it seemed like we were picking all things back in the 20s and before, would you update?
Yeah, right. Like if we haven't updated it since 96, some properties have already, now hit that 50-year mark that we're not on that list. So yeah, that's why we really need to update our survey to determine which properties may be eligible. Doesn't mean that they are, but if they did want to be designated locally, or if they need to have a certificate of appropriateness when they develop. So I think that that keeping that fresh. If it's been 25 years since it's been updated, that's a lot. Those are a lot of properties that may now qualify.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, but how are we careful on on that just because it's 50 years old doesn't mean it's historic.
No, it doesn't. And that's why the survey itself gets updated. It gets updated by a historic preservation consultant, a professional who will go through and do an evaluation of the properties to determine what should or shouldn't be on the survey. That doesn't mean that it's designated. It's just saying that, when that property wants to do, the owner wants to do something on that property, that we evaluated at that time to see if it still could qualify and evaluate it in more detail.
I think the city of West Hollywood has a very detailed plan also, should you want to demolish a historic property, the efforts that you need to go through and the records that you need to provide. So video, plans, documentation, and then you deposit that into the library, and that sort of gives you a historical preservation record other than keep the property. So, so that if you're going to if there's going to be a contemplation of update, that there's also needs to be not an escape route, but basically a plan to allow for the proper demoing of a deemed historic property. So.
Right.
They have a lot of rent control rules and things like that about how you can move people in and out of properties, though, too, Nick. So I think it's a little bit different when you take a look at that for West Hollywood. Because of the restrictions on rent control and the rules associated with that, people try to change up the character of an older property over there. And there's a lot of different ways and tools that they use to do that.
Okay. No, good point. Thank you.
And that would be a detail to work out in the preservation ordinance. So I'm going to keep us moving so that we'll put that note to self down, and we're almost done. So the last part that we were thinking is what I had talked about earlier, if we call it either focused areas, a lot of that, what we called in the beginning, the areas where we were doing focused areas of change would fall in this category. So we could call them special policy areas or focused areas. So we would list most of the ones that you've already talked about in the housing overlay areas if we need to do that, because that's some special policy direction. And then I thought AES, Riviera Village, and ACAP would obviously be there. And so if there are any others, that's what we wanted feedback. It's like, okay, if there's a special district or a neighborhood or something else that we should be looking at, that was the last piece to it, really. So this would be the time for us you've been giving us comments throughout, and I can do a summary of some of the things I've heard, but we haven't heard from everybody. So at this point, if there are people that haven't chimed in yet and have some ideas or things that they haven't heard, I would love to hear from you, and then we can circle back around and make sure those that have commented, if there are still other things they need to share with us, then we can make sure we get those as well.
Wendy, I was just going to say on the first one under confirm, I think we've already talked about that.
Okay.
Early on, committee member Light's comment, that it wouldn't be just that we remove that zoning level text, that we can maybe highlight it separately so that when we're going through it, we can see if that's appropriate or if we can change the language at those times.
Yeah, we'll call it out and do an ask. Okay. And if there's ones that are really important, that helps too. You can tell us which one, point us like, okay, this one is okay, but this one's got to stay. That would help too. Because otherwise it's a target. We're just guessing. So it would help us if we could get bumped in the right direction. Maybe I'll ask this. So I'm not seeing any general comments, or maybe people are thinking, but are there the focus areas, the special policy areas, are those good? Should we start there? Is that no responses that they're fine, or we're thinking?
Wendy, we got a couple of questions. Maybe. Okay. Member Pinzel.
We spent an awful lot of time working at something, and then the state came along and said, oh, sorry. What is on the horizon that is going to limit these topics that we're talking about? What
I would be a rich lady if I knew that answer.
What do you see in the present sessions, amongst your planning professionals, of what are the areas in which we should spend our time actually even thinking about this.
Well, do you want to go ahead, Brandy?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, the latest one that we had was the SB 9, Senate Bill 9, on for single family zones, that we have to allow split a lot to be split into 2 lots and up to 2 units on each lot. So, that's
I'm aware of the present stuff. I'm just thinking
Right.
that
Right
our goal
now-
here is to think farther in the future. And
they haven't been proposing anything yet this year. I think they hit us with some really big stuff in the last couple of years. So we haven't seen anything coming across the plate yet for this year. Just, it's going to be housing related, whatever it's going to, like most probably we're going to see things that are going to be housing related.
And I think, we're seeing a lot about climate adaptation and resiliency and what that looks like. And so, it's the strategies, it's the stuff we were talking about, how do we get people out of their cars? What's the walkability for you guys? Your open space is a big deal, right? Because you're built out and a lot of your livability and air quality and things that you like are related to that. As far as, I swear it's changing all the time on the housing. All we know is that we're seeing neighborhoods now have these new laws where that's changing their character. So stuff is starting to come up. So to me, I still look at those opportunities around your green line stations. Like, to me, those are going to be some things where you guys can focus to try to keep stuff out of your single family, if you want to keep those neighborhoods as single family as possible. But it's really hard to say. It's changing day by day. And even we're getting to a point where I feel like as a planner, I feel like I have a law degree because we're toe to toe with how we implement things with all the lawyers. But I don't have a total crystal ball. It's just the housing crunch. And then what do we do for jobs?
Could there be a bolstering of the Emergency Housing Act and probably a more streamlining to CEQA for like the a point in which, because CEQA has been used in a way that is impaired so much that it's eased up, so it's not used as a weapon. Sort of the weaponization of CEQA is something that you listen to so much that could the state be doing something to alleviate some of that?
Possibly. I'd have to check with what is in the crystal ball from our managing principal and the E team. But I don't know what that would do necessarily for how you guys want to grow as a city and how you want to evolve on the types of uses you want to see.
Yeah, I think, Bob, that's a really good point. As we start going through the policies, maybe just start thinking about, and hopefully, we'll start seeing what's being developed this year on the housing front of state laws. But but we can be thinking about, are these policies going to be obsolete as we go through them? Like, what could the state do that would just wipe this out? So just kind of having that in the back of our minds as we go through these. I mean, it's not like the perfect world of how to plan, but I think that is a really good point, Bob. And then also the climate action work. I mean, we have a lot of that, and we want to make sure, committee member Gaddis mentioned that early on about sustainability and really wanting to address some of those issues. So I think that, we can, as we move those policies forward, they're likely going to be very aligned with where the state's going on that.
And we get updates from APA about the things that they're tracking and watching. So if that would help for us to share that with you, the kinds of things that are out there, sometimes we just don't know. It's like, here are bills that are being proposed, but then they don't end up happening. So we keep an eye on them and go from there. So we'd be happy to provide that resource.
That would be great.
We have some other questions, Member Lamb.
Yes, thank you. 2 questions or comments. On the focus areas, I've talked with Brandy before about the potential for using smart code for these specific residential areas. So I wanted to know, is that a possibility? Is the element here an appropriate location to bring that up?
Well, smart code is the tool to implement. So if there is a particular thing that you're looking to preserve, or that, you know, there's different ways to write code to be able to get what you want. So I think if we knew what the background, if it's the neighborhoods or if it's the characters, the streetscapes, like all of that, I mean, smart code is definitely something that could be explored as part of an implementation action.
So how would that be written into the land use element?
So the structure, it would be very similar. Remember how in the open space element, you've got goals and policies. So we'd have to look at the policy of where it's a way to implement, like it's a way of writing a code. So if you're trying to implement something special in a policy, then we would have that separate document like you have in the open space, where it's like, explore the use of a smart code to do X, Y, or Z as a tool. Brandy, right. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's where I would put it, is in the implementation.
There might be something more on that policy level of, you know, where it might say explore, you know, different zoning tools that might, you know, best implement the identity or whatever it might be that we're trying to go for that policy. Right. And then under that would be the implementation item of, you know, pursue a smart code for this focus area. You know, it might be something, you know, I think it's not quite as broad of just kind of, you know, like I think that you'd want to have something a little bit broader on the policy, because maybe it's not the right, you know, maybe a specific plan is what's more appropriate for, you know, a different focus area that you would want to have that in the implementation, but you're looking at zoning, different zoning procedures for different areas.
Right. The context for my interest here is really the housing element, and these new focus areas have been very controversial, and smart code or whatever specialized manner code that these areas are treated, that engage the community and really maximize the opportunity there, is really what I'm after. Again, Brandy, you mentioned another method that might be better for another overlay area, right?
Yeah, or like like a form-based code versus do you do a specific plan, or do you, you know, a variety of different zoning tools that could be utilized.
Yes, I certainly would like to see that for these overlay zones, mainly because of the concern of the community. So that's that question. The other one is about compatibility. There are compatibility matrices that other communities have used. I've seen a range of them. What would be the objection to using to providing a compatibility matrix in terms of different intensities? What would be the argument against having that included in land use element?
I would like to see some of what level of detail they include, because I think that's what it really relates to. Because when we say create compatible transitions, we're not actually outlining what the transition is in the general plan. We're saying it needs to be compatible and it needs to be studied, and here are the tools that tell you how to do it, and it's in another document. So I would be curious of what that the ones that you have seen look like. I'd be open to that. And then we could see what that would mean and how we could integrate it into the general plan. And
Okay.
That's what we plan on doing is the same thing. But every time you guys have given us comments, we'll go through all of them. And then, if they're, and we'll have to talk to Brandy and Sean about this, but you might be thinking of things while you're brushing your teeth tonight. So we might, give everybody a week or so. It's like, if you think of something, you want to send us an email, that would be great, because then we can take that and then we can respond and say, we went through every one and this is why it's included or not. And this is where we would address it and how. And so that way you can see, it gives us a minute to look stuff up, do the research, have a good answer for you, and then we can deliberate about, where it best fits.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Szymanski.
Thanks. Bob actually covered part of one of my 2 points, the aspect of the ADUs and the dividing up the lots and all of that. I honestly feel that if we don't specifically address that as a factor in this planning, that it's going to be farcical that we don't even incorporate some statements that say that it could obviate these elements of the plan or these sections of the plan or these aspects of the plan, and then try to take some sort of proactive stance against the implementation of it. What I mean by that is, should it be implemented, what type of effect in general, not specific, it might have on the work that we've done. I just think that that's a recognition of where we are. And I realize that that's opening up another topic, but I'm not suggesting that we would deal with it in any great depth. But I think it merits consideration and inclusion. The second piece that I wanted to throw in deals with the comments that we had earlier about the acceptability of what we had presented to the council. And it sounded like maybe I didn't quite catch the entire merit of the responses to that, but it sounded like, well, why don't you guys go talk to your representatives, and I think that was the end of it. Really, I think given thoughts like Jim had, like, hey, well, why don't we just throw the rest of the baby out with the rest of the bathwater? Hey, I think that we ought to have something that addresses the considerations that they gave it, since apparently they did it in haste. And this is a long-term deal that we've been putting through here, something that's supposed to last decades. I don't think it should be dealt with in haste like that. I think not only because we might have individual concerns about, the merit of our work and the amount of effort that we put into it, and perhaps it being coming to naught, but then also just for the plan itself, I just don't think that we should let them, kind of make a ruling like that and then we just move on. So those are my 2 things. In both cases, I'm talking about going back and addressing something. But in neither case am I trying to say, hey, we need to develop a whole new body of work. In both cases, I think I'm saying we need to put the provisions in there to deal with the responses that we've gotten or the events that have taken place while we've been doing our work. So I would really hope that would go down as an agenda item or something, and not just either one of these just get tossed off as, well, go talk to some people about it. I'd like to actually see, I don't know if somebody needs to make a motion or what have you. I certainly am not going to do that, but I would like to have something a little bit more meaty than just, hey, go away and think about it. That's it for me.
Well, I think this is the time and the place to make that motion. I mean, this group doesn't get a chance to participate in the agenda creation. And if there's something that you feel that needs to be on there, and that there's a focused discussion on what our message needs to be, I don't see why this is not the time and the place to make a motion to agendize a specific discussion on how we present our work product up.
Well, okay, yeah, I definitely agree with you. What I meant to say by that was for two reasons. One is I didn't want to prolong a meeting by myself and, kind of be responsible for that, because I think it's a discussion that we ought to have. And on that point, the reason why I wouldn't make a motion is because I think a discussion is needed about those points. If you see what I'm saying, I think it's premature to make a motion for those until we have some sort of a discussion group about it.
Correct. So Charlie, I think you can request that we have an agenda item at our next meeting to discuss what those points can be. So it's going to be a two-step process. Let's get something on there so we can have a discussion, and then we can build on that at the next meeting and get some discussion. So this basically tails to almost our last meeting. And the discussion, I was saying that we're all going to get some input on our recommendation. It's not just going to be a vote. I think our vote's going to be, either a letter or a document by each one of us that goes along with that. So I can certainly support that goes on the agenda for our next meeting, and then we have a discussion about it.
Okay, well then, I would look at that as two things. One, dealing with the zoning aspect of things and what happened at the state level on that, and then the other one dealing with the council and interaction with them, or some sort of a contact with them to try to get their input and find out what our relevance really is based on their opinions.
So I can move that if that's your motion.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I move that we put two items on the forthcoming agenda that would deal with the two items that I mentioned, which are some addressing of the state zoning mandates that have been handed to the various cities in the state, including ours, and maybe including Rena in that. I don't know. That would be something that I would have to leave. And the second one being to add something to have a loop through, or a feedback loop with the council that would allow us to get some visibility into their rationale and have an interaction with respect to what that means for us, and then maybe give them our impression of where we stand as well. Those are both long-winded.
Brad Waller seconds.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. I know we have some hands up, but could we take, Member Solomon, can I ask you just lower your hand for a second while we take a quick vote on that motion? So we have a motion and a second. All of those in favor for those two items go into our agenda, please raise your hand.
We're at 17. I believe we have 18 in attendance, but 17 voting yes.
Okay.
Okay, who is that guy?
Okay. So
we all know. Okay, well,
I voted no.
Yeah, Lena, there are actually two people that did not.
Oh, no.
Raise, yeah.
So we have.
It's okay.
So we have 16 yeses and 2 noes.
Okay.
So thank you, Member Szymanski. I know Member Solomon has his hand up for a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bureau. I'd like to go ahead and tail on to something that the Chair said a few minutes ago, and we discussed, we haven't really discussed very much, which is the third rail, the AES plant. My understanding of SB 9, Nick, is that CEQA challenges are mitigated under SB 9, whether or not you can raise a CEQA challenge to some projects. Brandy, is that correct or incorrect?
For SB 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, SB 9 will be for single family residential only. And those projects would be, if I recall correctly, are CEQA exempt.
Okay.
So the lot split or putting two on the lot, each of those lots would be exempt from CEQA.
Okay. And then for, then broadly speaking, for more dense projects, the AS site, based on HCD guidelines, had a lot of challenges. HCD prohibits selecting sites that require environmental mitigation. HCD prevents using sites that lack infrastructure, amongst other things, the site being zoned as a park with a CUP. So in the greater context of when you talk about special areas of consideration and you've listed the AES site, are you asking what would your dream be for something like that for us as a group to throw out there? I'm trying to get an idea of what you all are looking for from us, for example, of the AES site in special areas of consideration.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Eugene. Wendy, would that be more of a just acknowledging that the planning for that site will need to be done? Or is there something more that you were looking for in that?
Well, I just think we know that it is a special place and that everybody's keeping an eye on it, right? That we're like, okay, so we're not looking at land use changes there because those have already kind of been decided, or what, the land plan right now with every conversation and the overlays from HDD. So I think what we could do is go back and take a look and see what kinds of things, I just don't know. I don't know that we knew if it's more, obviously there's been talk about, wetlands there and what could property, I don't know. I don't know until we brainstorm about it. I think we just knew that it was special and we didn't know what kind of additional guidance we could provide there or studies or other things to make sure that it gets the special attention needs as projects are considered there.
Yeah,
okay,
Wendy.
Go ahead, Brandy. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, we did add in the housing element some of the like historical background of, the interest for open space, the grant applications, the wetlands, that kind of. So I think that information would be good to have there because that's going to inform.
Yeah,
it needs to be more planning process, right? There needs to be a remediation. There's so much that needs to be studied on that site.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because I know that you said, we need to take a look at the executive summary and really have an understanding about the strategies you guys put together in the housing element to make sure there's that overlap there. So that'll be important. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think it's such a controversial location.
Yeah, of course.
For one thing, there's I don't know that we as a group would find consensus on that. You find more disagreement than consensus amongst the group here. If it's an idea of us as a group thinking of a wish list of things that we would want to see, or that this is something where we're going to go back and get more information from the public, and you listed it for as a placeholder, no pun intended, Wendy, as a placeholder to say these are areas of consideration that if you want to weigh in. Just to get some clarity there, because we go too far down the road on AES. We'll be here for hours. And
yeah, I don't think we'll ever get a general plan adopted.
Right.
That's good. That's good feedback. It's like we know it's important, just like you're saying. So we're going, well, there's maybe something there. So, but to your point, we're not trying to go so far down that we have to, have a whole debate on AES. That's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, so. And maybe to your point, Eugene, would be instead of like just the wish list, it might be more of a wish list of the studies that you want to see done on that.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a really good suggestion, Brandy. The idea of what can be done, what timelines are. How long does it take to mitigate a brownfield site? How long does it take? We know that we already know some things about how long the power plant contracts extend. We are uncertain about whether or not they'll be extended again. So maybe some of those things would be better served. I think the mitigation, and it's hard to say because we don't know what's there, but how long some of these things take to plan out in big picture so that it's maybe not a 6-year process, it's a 2-year process. Or it's not a 2-year, it's a 15-year. And I think that helps inform then the public about your input is going to be for something that's really 15 years down the road. So what processes would we consider, I think is a great idea in order to inform and explore opportunities at that area of special designation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Member McKenzie. You have your hand up, so. Okay, hands down. Member Light.
Yeah, I'm a little scared of what I just heard. I was hoping when I saw AES and the SCE corridor in there, we were talking about making the land use element congruent with the open space and recreation element, where we did say some uses that we specifically, opportunities that we wanted to pursue there, not to define new uses and give entitlements to the current owners. I think that would be dumb of us to apply a land use to that gives a speculative buyer of the AES site some entitlement to something he doesn't have today.
Yeah, Jim, that was not at all. What we said was, what are the things that you would want to make sure that we are, that we would want to recommend that we study? What would, you got that on, but Eugene was talking we weren't saying we want to see what uses you want to see there. And I like your idea of let's go back and make sure that we have whatever we recommended in the open space element that we're tying, it's that congruency. I like that. Yeah, I don't think we were talking about, at least that was not my intent, was to have people suggest uses at all. It was more of things do we need to study.
That's not my intent either, Jim.
First of all, it's, it's a big muck yard that we would take weeks on amongst us, because I think there's different ideas. But second, like I said, you'd give entitlements to the current owner, and that would drive up the price of any public land that we want out of there. And so I think it's counterproductive for us to engage in anything that would even smell like entitlements on that site.
But let me ask, if it's okay to encumber with an open space designation, isn't that sort of a taking in the same way as?
It's already rated, it's already zoned. The only permitted use on that site is parkland.
But according to?
Current zoning.
The zoning.
So basically power plant or open space?
Power plant's a conditional use, public utility.
Okay, public utility or open space?
Public utility is a conditional use.
Okay.
Parkland is the other designation.
Designating wetlands, isn't that sort of encumbering it with something that's not there?
We didn't do that. That's what the Coastal Commission did.
Yeah, let us pull together some of the narrative of what we have provided in the housing element. It explains like what are we required? That site required to provide? What is some of the history? What's been done? But really, it's going to be looking at there's going to need to be a planning process. That's really big. What I imagine is going to be this a policy or a goal is that there will need to be a planning process for the site. But what are the things that we're going to need to look at? The environmental remediation, the obligation for wetlands from the Coastal Commission, the interest for open space from the community. So I think that, those are just things that we can lay out. That doesn't mean, it's really just saying that we are recommending a planning process take place for the, don't ignore that there's a 50-acre site.
This guy, we have a guy who bought it on speculation of what he wanted. Why wouldn't we wait till he comes forward with something? Why would we sit there and do his work?
What we're saying is to determine any different land uses would require a planning process.
No, he
It's
could
not
come,
saying who does it. It's not
he
saying.
comes forth with a project and then the community votes on it.
If he comes forth with a project that's allowed under the zoning, whether it's a CUP or, but
No, he could do what AES did and put out an initiative.
Well, how about this? How about you guys give us your just brainstorm on the ideas and then we'll take a look at, we hear what you're saying, Jim. We hear what, we know that there's some options and then we'll bring it forward to you and see if it works for you or not. And we can debate it when we've drafted something.
Okay, because we did the exact same thing with the previous owner of the Center Cal property. The guy bought it from Mar Ventures. I forget what they were called, Dell something. They bought it from Mar Ventures. They did nothing to the property and the city upzoned the property. They sold it back to the city for more money than they paid for it. They made money for doing nothing and the city paid the price. And I don't want to do that here with the AES site.
That's my take.
Member Moses.
Did our mandate change? Because in the 3 years we've been doing this, we've never discussed AES, and now we're going to do it in the 11th hour. So I actually support Jim Light's suggestion. We shouldn't talk about this at all. It shouldn't be in the general plan. It's nothing we should even talk about because we haven't talked about it at all. And it has such a huge presence in the city. It would have affected everything else we did. So to talk about it now, to even suggest, oh, maybe we should think about planning it. Well, yeah, no kidding. They should think about planning it, but it's up to the owner to bring something in front and then the city will vote on it. It just seems like wasted breath for us to suggest anything about the AES site.
I can support that since I don't know what changed because I remember our first meeting, there was two things we were not allowed to talk about was AES plant and the waterfront. So there were the two forbidden properties that we could not talk as a group. So,
well, and then we can put the direction in the plan. If that's the case, it's like, at this point, we have to acknowledge that it is there in the land plan. It is a big deal. So we can have a text or a side box saying, at this point, the city's direction is that we're going to wait to see something. And that's instead of, you'll respond to something instead of doing studies. So that's fine. That's a fine direction. But, we just want to acknowledge it because it is a big district and it is a point, to say nothing. We just got to say what we're planning on doing and why.
Okay.
Any member got us? Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Your hands hiding behind your books.
Am I mistaken, or was the also the Galleria considered a something we weren't allowed to discuss? Maybe I'm mistaken on that, but
the actual approval, the Galleria site in and of itself is adopted, done, but everything south of it that we were talking about.
yeah, that was one of the focus areas.
Mm-hmm.
no, I meant the Galleria itself.
Oh yeah, what Wendy just said.
What she said.
Okay.
This is all helpful because this, we don't want to do a whole write up on AES and you guys go take that out. We'd rather spend time on other things.
Okay, let's see what Member Simpson has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little confused. I thought we had referenced in some way or another the AES site in the open space element. Wasn't that referenced? Or am I forgetting what we had in there?
Yeah, I think, that we talked about that. That was what Committee Member Light was just mentioning.
Right. So, I mean,
we definitely want to make sure that we at least cross-reference that those goals and policies are there.
Yeah, it does seem to me that we need to be consistent between the two elements. What I was hearing there sounded like we didn't want to talk about it all in this element, but we've already referenced it in another element. So,
which is what I said. I mean, if we're not going to talk about it, then we need to remove any reference anywhere else to just for consistency and for not identifying something that's not.
I'm sorry, you're saying we should take it out everywhere?
No.
Well, no, I mean, if we're not going to have any discussion about it, it should not be referenced anywhere because it would set precedent for a taking. And I know that if the Coastal Commission made a designation, that needs to be part of the studies that get done.
It can't be a taking, Nick, because it's the current zoning.
No, yeah, but wetlands is not the current zoning.
No, but the wetlands is parkland.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Parkland is not wetland. That's completely different. So
the current designation is parkland, and wetlands can be in a parkland.
Okay. Well,
and we don't. The Coastal Commission has made its ruling there. That's beyond the city of that. That's a statewide concern on wetlands.
Well, no, but that's correct. So when a project comes forward, the city will identify that has been done by the Coastal Commission, and then
I don't think we should take it out of what we just mulled over in the open space document. We said it's an opportunity that we need to explore and take advantage of. And the state created it and the current zoning creates it.
That was my recollection that that's what we said. And it would seem to me if we said that in that element, we should be saying what's consistent to that position in this element. I would have thought, but then again, I'm perhaps very confused.
My understanding, what I'm hearing right now is that we don't, the sentiment is that there should not be references to planning processes at all, but it's to acknowledge that it's there and that as something comes in, it will be reviewed. Right?
We're not changing the open space document, right?
Correct.
Okay, now that's.
Yeah, leaving the open space document.
What did we say?
What Jim just acknowledged, that we'll explore the, we'll pull that up. We'll make sure that it's because we have that cross-reference in the open space of like, here's what's in another, we'll have that same thing in this where it just shows that here are the open space policies related to it. So when you see the draft, we'll have it in there.
We'll show that at this point, projects will come in and will be reviewed on their merit when they come in and do all the studies they need to when they come in. And by the way, in the open space element, there's an acknowledgement that there's opportunities to explore connectivity or what I wasn't here in your meetings. So I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but it would be like, and by the way, when those projects come in, take a look at this opportunity. Based upon the feedback I'm hearing tonight, that's what it translated as.
that sounds good. And Wendy, you do need a new microphone.
Darn it! I have to talk to my IT guys or something. I'm loud too. Sorry.
They're very cheap.
So here's you can't see it.
I need to do this? Okay, I'll get one of those.
You connect it to your.
You can see all the stuff on my desk. I just wanted one less thing to make all this.
Wendy, when the mic does pick you up, your normal vocal ability does show up.
Yes, through our speakers. Yeah.
Oh, so when I see you wince, then I know you're like turned.
We're like,
yeah, back. All right. Well, so we're at 9:00. So do you guys feel, I'm trying to figure out where to go here. And Brandy and Sean, we didn't talk about like comments after the fact, but would you be open to getting, just some feedback emailed to us within a week? If people think of things, I can do a recap on the things I have heard. Or do we have more comments and we want to stay for a little bit? Or chair?
Well, I think before we take additional questions, I think we need to look at what we want to do. So I think this group has worked pretty well getting feedback back to you. And I don't see why we shouldn't do a quick recap and then request that we provide our comments back to you instead of dragging this out. So let's just get a little recap and then give us our homework and we will get those to you within a week. But I think it would be helpful, and I'll ask this as what the request would be, that this feedback that you're asking for be followed with an email to all of us, reminding us of the feedback we're going to do. So we just, since it's late and we're probably going to just, so give us your recap and what feedback you want from us. And Lena, I'll impose on you to send a note to all of us, go, hey guys, we need feedback from you by such and such date.
Okay. Hallie, you'll back me up if I miss anything, right? Okay. So I heard in the beginning, make sure we check on the flight pass for helicopters and check into the Hawthorne Airport. We wanted to make sure we looked at quality of life and livability in the way that we're presenting things. I heard some discussion about just how looking at neighborhoods maybe. So there was some back and forth on that about for design guidelines or not in neighborhoods. So we're gonna take a look at what that means and character and whatnot and see what we can present to you on that. There was a request to look at protecting the existing affordable units that are there, which I'm sure there's probably something in the housing element too that we can cross-reference. Prioritizing the attraction and just integration of office uses for jobs. Looking at environmental sustainability, so energy, water use, runoff, trash. So we figure out how we cross-reference those to some of the other elements, but integrate environmental sustainability. There was a discussion about how we count open space. And then let's see what else I have. Looking at
how we count it on private property.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, how we count open space on private property. We have noise and what that impact is on health and vitality, and we'll look at how that integrates into our noise element and what we can pull in now and tie that back to the other element. We talked about, let's see, some of I have notes on the historic, but I think those are just commentary. Looking at in the potential in implementation or somewhere for integrating smart code, looking at how that applies to either housing elements or focus areas or, getting a maximized opportunity for the residents to weigh in on those overlays and how they get integrated or implemented. Sheila, if I can give you a homework assignment to send me a compatibility matrix that you saw, that would be great. I'd love to take a look at that. There is the motion that everyone approved talking about just how the recommendations get implemented or the conversation with council. And I'm not saying it all right, but you guys heard all of it. So we know where we're going with that. We offered, and I think the two things that we also have to send you or should send you are the APA, kind of the things that they're watching in their, latest, here's legislation. And then I think the executive summary of the housing element would also help because there's a lot of write-ups that Brandy's referring to that relate to how we, AES or other things that might help you guys see what was covered there and how we're going to integrate that. Trying to see. Okay, I think that's all I have. Am I missing anything?
Yes.
Nick, if I could just, or Wendy, could I just clarify, with regard to the helicopter, it's that out on that mole out at Moonstone Park, which is part of our open space. I believe it's a requirement that we have that area remain available for the landing of helicopters.
And there's defined clearance area. So when follow up with me and we'll get that to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I had that. I didn't mischaracterize it.
Thank you.
Member Szymanski.
Yes, Wendy, on the aspect of the motion that was approved, I think it was 16-2, by the way. There were two elements to that. One dealt with the impacts and recognition of state zoning mandates to the city. And the second one dealt with the response of the council to our recommendations and submissions. So there were really two separate points, just to get those
Okay.
meeting out properly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Light.
Yeah, just one clarification. When I said about office space, I also said institutional and tech industry.
Okay.
And then second, I know we didn't bring it up, but I would like to see the details of the HCD response just so we can understand what they pushed back on and how easy it is to respond to, if that's doable.
On which, Jim?
The HCD response to our latest, you said we're almost there, but
Yeah, we haven't received anything formal from them that we expect to get on April 12th. We do.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah, we do have the one that triggered the changes that we got back in.
Yeah, I got that one. Yeah. Okay. I'm
It's
fine with
coming.
that. But the last thing was, I honestly, I think it's fine for us to go back and think and shoot you some more stuff. But I think you're going to get your best feedback when we get a rough, your first draft, kind of like we did with the open space, where we can see everything lined up and you can read it in context.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. We just wanted to, we kind of went back and forth because sometimes when we made the baby and gave it to you, it's like, well, why didn't you think about all of these things? So this is really helpful to us so that we can make sure we're trying to incorporate the things that we know are of highest priority to you and be as responsive. But obviously there's going to be a lot that you guys are going to react to when.
Yeah, I just think things jump out at you more when you can read it in direct context.
Totally fair.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Member Nafisi.
Good evening. When is the next time that you guys plan on giving City Council an update on how much longer we have with this GPAC meeting?
We don't have anything scheduled for an update for them, but when we provide them with, when we get the response back from HCD on the housing element, that, like I said earlier, that's really tied in with the build out analysis and us starting the environmental. So at that point, we can also then give an update of, where we're at with the GPAC.
Okay, and you guys have an estimate of how many more meetings you think this might go?
Do you want me to give you an overview?
Yeah.
What we have budgeted?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've got when we're going to get a draft.
27. We have 3, 2 more land use and 1 final. So hopefully we're not still talking about land use, but we've got 3 total.
Right.
And I can, I can show you that quick.
Is there an open bar party budgeted?
I mean, seriously.
Trust me.
This
I got a little bit
project
grayer in this. Okay, wait, no, I have to give you context. And I'm going to put Hallie on the spot here. Hallie has been on this project. She has gotten married, had 1 baby, and she's going to have a second baby before we get a land plan done. So
she's going to have grandbabies if we don't hurry up.
She's due in May, you guys. So she's going to have this baby while we're trying to get through her last 2.
Congratulations, Haley.
Congratulations.
She's getting more done than we are.
Okay.
So Wendy, did you want to bring up kind of what our next steps are? I think you had a couple slides on that just so you've got dates to kind of plug into your calendars.
Yeah, and I also had, and I don't know if it's still on the agenda, do we have a second round of public comment too? So I had that before this, so that's why I was.
So we can see if there's any additional.
Okay.
Yeah, Wendy, at this time, there's none at this time.
Okay, so we've got it covered. So can you see the schedule?
Yes.
You see this, all of this? You guys did all of this. That's a lot. And there was more before that, but this was the most recent. So you guys achieved, for what all the conversations you've had. And, I'm just going to be the proud mama for a minute and say how it's been really rewarding watch you guys talk through all these really difficult things. You've accomplished quite a bit. So we say complete on the housing element. We're just waiting for that other letter. So we're pretty much there. We've got tonight's meeting for the outline. You are here. The land use element draft meetings, 1, 2, and 1 and 2. So, we have 3 in the final. So we actually have 3 more meetings after this. somewhere there's going to be an EIR scoping meeting. So if we get feedback on the housing element in those months and we can run the build out and get that final build out blessed, and we can get the EIR going. And so there could be a scoping meeting in there. We just don't know yet. So we'll keep you posted on when that is. And then that's what I was talking about. The fourth community meeting will be scheduled after you guys have, your opportunity to weigh in on the rest of the plan and it being consolidated. Then Planning Commission and City Council. Then at some point, as Hallie put, Buzz Lightyear 2023 and beyond, we have no idea. There'll be a vote and it'll go to Coastal Commission. So the fun doesn't stop after GPAC meeting 27. So does that help on the next steps?
Do we have approximate dates?
Yeah, let's get to the date for the next one. We were looking at
when her granddaughter's born.
Don't say that.
No. So we're looking at.
Then I won't be facilitating these meetings. It'll be Hallie.
Right. So our next discussion for the land use element, we look at. We were looking at, the time it would take us for preparing that at least before Hallie has her second baby, and no grandbabies yet. But yeah, well, so we were looking at the May 26th meeting as us being able to get you a draft a couple weeks in advance of that, so you can, start looking at and make sure you have it, so you have a couple weekends worth of time to go through it. And then, and we'll go through kind of that draft and as well start working on the goals and policies.
So
that's a lot of work.
But curious, our meetings were supposed to be on Thursdays. This is on a Tuesday now.
No, I thought we did.
Oh.
Did I pick a
The
wrong
Thursday.
day?
Oh, no, okay. I'm sorry. My bad. Wrong month.
Yeah.
Are you giving us 3 more months?
No, he was looking at
I
April.
was looking at April. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. No, May 26th. So lock it in on your calendars.
So now you said, is that a virtual meeting? I was under the impression we may actually
We
be
don't
having
know
that.
yet. We don't know yet.
Public Works Commission was talking about having their April meeting in person.
No, none of the April meetings for the commissions are going to be in person. City Council will be determining, I want to say at their April 12th meeting, they're going to be talking about when they want to go back into council chambers. And when they go back in council chambers, that's when the commissions will go back in council chambers. We did a little test run with it was not a commission meeting, but we had a little community budget workshop on Tuesday. Not a lot of attendance from the community in person, but there were some people online, and it's something that could go back and be replayed. But we wanted to test out the equipment because we are going to be doing a hybrid. So some people could be, joining the meeting and giving public comment through Zoom. Some people could be doing that in public or in person at the council chambers. So we don't know yet. That's my long way around of explaining that. Once
there seemed to be an impression that with the Public Works Commission meeting being the last Monday in April, that quite possibly would be in person, but that. I don't know.
I think they want to start with council, but
This would be after that 17th date of council, so it's in the last.
I could be out of the April 12th is when they're going to talk about when they're going to choose to go in person. So it's not that they're saying, yeah, we're going back into person next week, because it wouldn't be. They've already cleared to have all April meetings be virtual. They have to adopt that every month for the following month, and they just already determined for April that they could, that they would do those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. If I may, real quick, it does look like you have a public comment now. So if it's okay, Chair.
Yes, please.
Okay. Holly Osborne. Holly, go ahead.
Okay, since you're taking public comments, this will be 15 seconds. Forget to sign the zoning initiative when it comes out again. We haven't stopped. They'll come out in probably 2023. And we won't have to do this SB 9 stuff, and we won't have to wreck your plans that you worked on. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Just
Thank you, Holly.
comment real quick. No e-comments. So that concludes public comment.
Thank you, Luna. So can we entertain an offer, a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Got a second? All those in favor?
Yeah, I.
Aye.
See you all on May 26th, hopefully in person. If not, it'll be virtual, but let's hope it's an in-person meeting.
Great. Thank you all for sticking with us and giving us the feedback. It's really, it really is helpful. And Lena will reach out with an email on how you can provide additional feedback in the next week or so.
Great. Thank you.